may lie ahead on the long journey home, the dusk and a thin mist soon obscured the coast. The vessel was gradually pulling farther out to sea, though the Italian sailing master, standing respectfully in the farthest corner of the quarterdeck, would always keep land in sight for as long as he could, navigation being uncertain on the open ocean. John de Wolfe stood immobile on the other side of the deck, the hilt of his heavy sword poking out from under his black cloak, ready to be drawn at any sign of trouble. Like that of the other retainers on the ship, his armour was stored below deck, well wrapped in oiled hessian. A hauberk of chainmail rusted quickly enough on land, but salt air and spray would ruin it within days. He stood bareheaded, his black hair a complete contrast to the fair auburn thatch of the king. Different, too, were the styles, as Richard Plantagenet's was cropped short below a line running round above his ears in the usual Norman manner. The maverick de Wolfe wore his long, swept back from his forehead to the nape of his neck. With satanic eyebrows of the same jet black as his hair and the dark stubble on his cheeks, it was easy to see why his nickname among the soldiery was Black John, though this was as much from his dour and unbending nature as from his appearance. His hooked nose and long, grim face were equally forbidding, though women somehow sensed that this was a man who could be a passionate lover. The Lionheart turned eventually and addressed himself to the sailing master. "When should we arrive in Cyprus? The wind seems favourable, does it not?" The Venetian raised a knuckled fist to his head in salute as he answered, "God willing, on the third day, sire. This breeze will take us well up the coast. Then we must weather across westwards to Limassol. I regret that the French nef makes no pretence at being a speedy ship." Richard and his advisers had chosen an ordinary merchant vessel for the journey, instead of the usual ship of war or a fast galley in which kings and princes normally travelled. The journey back to Normandy and England would be fraught with danger, as apart from sea-born Muslims and Mediterranean pirates, most of Europe's rulers were on the lookout for Richard Coeur de Lion, keen to revenge themselves on him for his real or imagined sins against them. Amongst these, Philip Augustus of France and Count Leopold of Austria hated him most, as they had abandoned the crusade in Palestine and returned home early, outraged at what they considered Richard's slights against them, and now his alleged capitulation to the Saracens. Another, who would dearly like to get his hands on Richard, was Henry of Germany, whose ambitions to conquer Sicily had been frustrated by the Lionheart. He had recently been elevated to Holy Roman Emperor after his father, William Barbarossa, had died falling into a river in Turkey on his way to Palestine at the head of a huge German and Hungarian army, most of whom had abandoned their mission after his death. An hour later, King Richard was still staring at the growing darkness, reluctant to lose the last fading glimpses of the Holy Land, until feet clattered up the ladder from the main deck and a man appeared alongside de Wolfe. "Go down and get something to eat, John," he murmured. "It's my turn to stand guard over our Lord, though it's time he went below. He can't stand there all night in the cold and the dark." The new arrival was William de la Tange, another staunch supporter and close friend of the king. A knight from Le Mans, he was a stocky, red-faced man of about 40, a couple of years older than John, with whom he had fought side by side in many of the campaigns against the Mohammedans. As part of the king's desire to make his voyage home as unobtrusive as possible, Richard was accompanied only by 10 Templar knights and a sergeant, but there were a few others aboard. These included John de Wolfe, William de la Tange, Baldwin of Bethune, his High Admiral Robert de Turnham, the chaplain Anselm, and his clerk, Philip of Poitou. This was a very different journey to the one the previous year, when Richard had set out from Marseille ahead of a massive convoy bearing his army of thousands of crusaders. The big merchant ship, known as a bus, was relatively empty, the crew well outnumbering the passengers. There was no cargo, which left plenty of room below decks for the horses.